Hello, everyone. To say these are unusual times just seems like kind of an understatement these days. Here we are in the sanctuary, and just me and Colin, and lots of space. And as much as we haven't been meeting in the sanctuary or having meals in the hall, there certainly has been some activity around the church, and there certainly is some sense of church community. And we thought this was an opportunity to have me ask some questions and interview some folks about how they're feeling about the role of the church in their lives in these unusual times. I asked staff and church members 2 questions, and I started with, what are you seeing that encourages you or inspires you about the role of the church in the community?
I think the thing that's really been encouraging has been like some of the comments we get back from people. So for me, ideally in-person worship would be best, right? And, doing it on Facebook or YouTube is okay. And the least satisfactory thing I would think is like the printed copy. And we send out quite a few printed copies, and people also read it just as an email sort of thing. And we've had really beautiful comments from people who are just reading the service, and I think, oh my goodness, like I wish I could do more for you than that. But it's so, we've actually been able to reach a lot more people in this time than we would have at any other time. We wouldn't have known that, right?
I really see the role that the 3 staff are playing has really changed in the last few years. The focus is not necessarily, and I don't want this to come across as being harsh, on our congregation members, because most of our congregation members are fairly well functioning. I mean, we all have our foibles, but on a general whole, our congregation members are functioning fairly well. And so but our church, and I think it's through the grocery assistance program and then the community meals that have been offered here on a monthly basis, our church has been known as a church that helps. And I think that's so key. Harold and Karen have shared some of those stories, just the everyday to-day stories of things, people who walk in the door, who have no affiliation with our church, who may not even live in our community, who may be transient, but they meet Karen McGill, who is warm and welcoming and understanding, and then if she can't help them or if they're needing to talk more, then Karen and Harold, are able to do that. And so I see it as almost a social ministry, and I've encouraged Harold to share that. Unfortunately, he's very humble, but we do hear little snippets of those stories. And I think that is what the church is about. It's important, yes, to make sure that our congregation members are doing well and to minister to them. But I think our pastoral care committee does a good job of that. But we are called to be the church in a wider world. And I think that is what this ministry team is doing. And I'm so impressed with the work that they do, reaching out to those in our community who have no one else to turn to.
So
I think all 3 employees worked through the whole thing and really never missed a beat. And maybe the congregation didn't know totally what they were up to, but they did work right through. So.
And financially, for the church, your responsibility is to make sure we're not off too far in the ditch, or that you report that back to us. How has that impact been?
Actually, really surprising, I think. We have quite a number of our givers on pre-authorized remittance or
Right.
PAR, and so of course, unless they change that, that happens monthly. So a little over $7,000 comes in every month. And surprisingly enough, when it's 6 months since we've had church, there's the people who donate weekly or monthly drop checks off, put them in the mail, or navigated e-transfers, and our givings to the end of August were very, very similar for local and mission service.
Okay.
Where our difference is in our rentals and our catering and our fundraising projects that, of course, we haven't been able to do.
Right. Well, that catering crew, they didn't ask for it, but they finally got a break.
Yeah, a big break. They'll be, so that's the tough part of it, but we've been healthy financially ahead of that, so
Okay.
just the fact that people are continuing to give their pledges or their wishes has helped a lot, I would think. The projects that we're on, the regular maintenance, the projects that we're on carried out. Like we got the wheelchair ramp completed, and the door openers on the bathrooms, and they're working on the lift now.
That's perfect.
And so
And we had a roof shingle?
last fall, yes, we did, and so the money was partially there from a bequest for that, and we cashed one of the GICs that was for building projects, so the money has been returned now to the local coffers, I guess.
Yeah.
The community is just very receptive to the ministry that we have to offer. We had already been exploring as a pastoral charge what God is calling us to do in the community of Carmen and in the area of Dufferin and in Elm Creek and in the surrounding small communities. We've learned a lot by working with our ecumenical partners through Carmen and District Ministerial. We've learned over and over again that we should always try to work together, because there's so many things that we can do well together that we would not even be able to imagine, let alone fulfill, working on our own. And I think we've taken that learning and we continue to apply it even in this pandemic time. A few years ago, our church was wondering how we could maybe respond more effectively to poverty in our community. And so we began to reach out to other churches and other organizations and individuals in the community, and people started coming together for a new conversation. And that's so exciting to me that our church has been seen as a resourceful place by people in the community, both people who live with all the constraints of poverty and not enough household income, right here in Carmen and Elm Creek, see us as a place that might be able to help, that might have some resources to share, that might be able to help them find their way in dark, difficult times. Also, others in the community have begun to recognize that we have some leadership to offer. They really affirmed that leadership of our church.
So are there...
In March, there was definitely a need recognized around what was happening for people who are poor in our community. People started asking new questions about that as the pandemic really broke, and thought about who were the most vulnerable in our community. And so this outpouring of generosity from our own community and from the wider community, responding to the physical needs that people might have. So we suddenly had the Carmen Bakery wanting to bake bread every week and have it delivered. And so they called us to see how we might help do that. So working together with Carmen and District Ministerial and Carmen Wellness Connections, especially the Food Security Working Group, we were able to figure out a way to deliver that bread to families every week. And then we continued that project in the summer when the potato growers had surplus potatoes. Again, we got a call. We have these extra cases of frozen potatoes. Would you like to help us distribute those to people?
And this church and this network was seen as the go-to to get that
We
done.
seem to get a lot of those calls, and I'm excited by the network of individuals and organizations and community helpers that we've been able to tap into and work with. Again, we couldn't do it on our own. It's not Carmen United Church doing it. It's just us sometimes hearing the call and inviting other people to be part of it.
And different stories I've heard from the past, but in terms of like the voucher program, there hasn't been a Tuesday or Thursday, as I said before, where there hasn't been a call, and I had no idea that program existed until I started working here. And maybe I'm just out of the loop because it sounds like other people do know about it, which is great. But
Don't feel too out of the loop. I certainly wasn't aware of all these things either.
but it's very eye-opening, and I think maybe I don't know if it was not me being naive or ignorant or whatever, but I didn't know there were opportunities to work on these type of things in Carmen. And I always thought, oh, when I get to the city, I'll volunteer for these different things. And then this job came along, and it's been eye-opening.
Both the needs and a response right here locally.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that happened really quickly was the food security working group that got going. Like we had the poverty reduction roundtable last November, and there were 8 working groups formed. And when this started, the food security group very quickly was called into action, as of course, people didn't know what the income situation was going to be.
Yeah.
Kids were not in school, so they were not getting breakfast programs or lunch programs. And the bakery had offered to bake bread, and they got some money from the credit union. And the group delivered bread and cereal and fruit for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then the grocery assistance program that we always run, of course, had higher needs. And there was an article in the paper, and the community just stepped right up with donations, like so many donations that have been so helpful. Because that never quit, the grocery assistance, there's need all the time, and it was more. And so, that's us, helping feed the hungry and look after people. It's not just feeding people, it's listening to people and helping them find other resources that they need, making sure they know about programs, right? And just helping people.